Okay, I think we should make a start now. So if I can get a thumbs up from Obi and Tunde, both of you, if you're happy for us to start.
Yes, I'm happy.
You're happy. Tunde, we're good to go? I believe so. All right. So hello and good evening to you all. Yeah, most of you have had the chance to talk to you over the phone. Many of you haven't met you. You haven't seen my face, if I put it that way. All right. So I want to use this opportunity to welcome you again to SmartLearning. Thank you so much for joining the compliance module of the Governance, Risk and Compliance training course. I'm sure you are enjoying the training. You are learning and you are also gaining new skills. Well, if you're listening to me from other channels other than Zoom, you are welcome. And thank you for joining this section. So for those that do not know exactly what we do or what we're about, SmartLearning is an IT security training organization. We train different types of courses, cybersecurity related courses, cloud related courses, governance, risk and compliance, which is the course that we are training you on today, data science, and IoT. So IoT, meaning Internet of Things. So we specialize in helping people to get job in cybersecurity or in other related field. So our training is practical and it is hands-on. We've been around in the last 7 to 8 years, helping people to transition, career into cybersecurity. So if you're out there or if you're listening and you need help in that area, we are here available to support and also to help you as well. So I have with me today Ngozi. I call her Obi, Ngozi Meitibemu. She's going to be taking us through this journey of compliance module on governance, risk, and compliance. So Ngozi is well experienced in this area. She's been training for us in the last couple of years. I consider her an expert here, and particularly someone that has the ability to communicate knowledge and also transfer skills to the other person as well. Trust me, you will really enjoy our training today. So I would say just listen attentively, get your pen, also get a kind of notepad where you want to jot things as well. This training is going to be practical. It's also going to be hands-on as well, and it's going to be interactive as much as possible. So if you're asking, if you have any questions, by all means, use the chat box. I think Tunde, who is going to be moderating this section, would get in touch as well at some point. If you have any questions, Tunde will be able to take those questions. So we are really in for a good time tonight and also tomorrow as well, as this section will continue tomorrow. So it's a pleasure to welcome you, Obi, today. And just also to let you know, Obi is also going to be taking, so Obi or Ngozi, she's also going to be taking the ISO essentials. It's part of the module that you guys sign up for. So for a lot of people that are non-technical and you're trying to come into the governance, risk and compliance space in cybersecurity, so that course itself is highly recommended. After spending the 2 days with you today and tomorrow, she will continue with the ISO 21001 essentials. So you also want to look, watch out for that particular course and ensure that you're available to learn from her. So again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I would also be in the background as well. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer your question and also to support you as well. So over to you, Obi or Ngozi, as you take us through the compliance module of the governance, risk, and compliance training. Obi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Wally.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have the control now. I think I will stop sharing so that you can start to share your slide, if that's okay.
Okay.
Just let me know when you're ready.
Yeah. Give me 1 second.
I've made you the co-host.
Yes.
Okay, can you try share first and see if it would override? Absolutely.
Yes, I can share.
Okay, fantastic. So over to you, and yeah, we will be in the background.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. Good evening. As Wale has rightly introduced me.
Would you mind to show them your picture just for a split of seconds?
Okay,
so
that's
people
fine.
can put a face to the name, and I can disappear as well, so that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can everyone see me?
We can see you.
This
so
is my humble self.
That's all right.
Yeah,
so
just in case you see
we can see the expert and the model.
All right. Okay, so I would disappear now, go into the background. If you feel comfortable, you can leave your video a bit, not, so that you don't distract people with your beautiful face, so that they can focus on the real thing rather than looking at.
Let me take it off.
All right, yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you. I'll just put my slides and presentation. I'll do a slideshow. Okay, thanks everyone for joining. But usually before I go into the session, I would usually ask the student if they can quickly introduce themselves. The essence of doing this is so I can get a brief understanding of the audience, my student, and minimize, the amount of technicality, or if I kind of deviate into technical areas, so that way I'll be able to understand your strength. So I think quick introduction and what you currently do would help me. Please, if you can just unmute yourself, quickly introduce yourself, and then tell us what you do, and that will be all, really, or what you intend to gain from this by joining the SmartLearning courses. Please, anyone can start. Just
who's gonna take a lead on that?
1 minute, just 1 minute or less.
The lady.
Hi, shall I start?
I know.
Yes,
Kay is gonna
yes, please.
Right. My name is Kay. I own my own supported housing business. I work with social services. We accommodate young people in the social care system. I'm looking to transfer the skills that I already have in terms of risk management, third party vendor risk assessment, and all that audit and stuff into a career in cybersecurity.
That's amazing. Thank you. How do you spell your name?
K-A-Y.
K-A-Y. Okay, you're welcome. Thank you, Kay. Yeah. Okay.
Any other person?
Okay, I think I'll go.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So my name is Alfred, and I'm coming from a health and social care background. I used to work as a social worker, and then I moved into health and safety, and pretty much now trying to steer myself towards cybersecurity. So yeah, there you go.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, can I give it a go?
Yes, please.
Oh, thank you. My name is Adewale Bello. I've been a security guard for years. Now a support worker now, planning to go into cybersecurity.
Okay.
Thank
you. Okay. Thank you, Adewale. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Hi there. My name is Temi, and I've been in the pharma industry for some time now, and actually for some years. currently working with the NHS as a data analyst, and I am also, what's it called now? I'm also an insurance advisor specialist. So yes, so I've got a lot of things going on at the moment, but at the same time, I'm open to cross over into cybersecurity. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Tammy, yeah? Tammy.
Yeah, Tammy, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Tammy. Yes, any other person? Do we have more? Do we only have 4 people on the call? I can see more than that.
Maybe others are shy.
Babatunde, Fola Shele, Mayowa, Olanike, Winnie. Okay, that's fine. But thank you so much to everyone that have introduced themselves, and for those that are on the call as well. You're welcome. Thank you. Just to mention that regardless of your background, regardless of what you currently do, regardless of where you're coming from, the fact that you've taken this bold step to move into information security would be a step that you would really, really pat yourself, on the back a few years from now. I started off as well at SmartLearning years ago, and look at the privilege I have today speaking to you and even training you as well. So it's a journey that is worthwhile. And I would really encourage you to just open your mind. Even if I mention anything technical, I'll try as much as I can to relate the compliance and the security audit aspect of this training to real life scenarios. So you'll be able to understand and it would resonate with you. And hopefully, if you, of course, you would get the gist of the whole sessions today and tomorrow. And of course, if you have any questions, please, you can put it in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask me, and I would be able to explain. Otherwise, Wale, who is on the call as well, we'll be able to jump in if it's really technical or kind of out of what we're talking about today.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. So I would be in the background to help if there are any technical questions. And also to just let you guys know that this section is being recorded. Well, it's not new anyway. Make sure that even if you have any question, Tunde is also going to help to, moderate this section as well. We'll be there to help you. You can use the chat box for your questions. There will be time and, where you can ask questions as well, where we'll open the call. Keep your background as noiseless as possible so that we don't mess up the recording. Thank you.
Thank you, Wale. Okay, let's get into it. So, of course, you've covered the governance aspect. You've looked at risk management. Now we're concluding this governance, risk, and compliance with the compliance and the security audit of it. Well, this is just a quote. We start with this one. And is from Benjamin Franklin. Say, tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn. And that's why we're having this today. So we're involving you, and the way that we can involve you is, of course, making it very interactive. So, of course, as I go through the slides, if you have any questions, ask me questions. The session is being recorded, which means you can go back to the sessions, listen and listen and listen, and make notes, please. Hope you have your pen to paper, make notes, make as much as you can. And these would also help you as you prepare for interviews as well, because most of what I'll be talking about, you will come across them. Even when you start applying as well, when you look at job roles, you'll find a lot of compliance responsibilities or compliance job descriptions for those who are not technical and would like to go down the route of GRC, which is governance, risk, and compliance. We have some learning objectives. As you can see on the screen, we'll be going through process of auditing, information system, governance and management of IT, information systems, operations, maintenance and support, protection of information assets, develop and implement risk-based IT audit strategy based on IT audit standards. Plan specific audits, determine whether information systems are protected, controlled, and provide value to the organization. Conduct audit in accordance with IT audit standards to achieve planned audit objectives. Most of these things might sound really high level, but when we get into the meat of what the learning objectives are, you'll be able to understand them. And then, of course, when you conduct your audit, you gather your findings, you definitely need to report your audit findings, and afterwards make recommendations to key stakeholders to communicate results and effect change when necessary. Then you conduct your follow-ups, prepare status reports to ensure appropriate actions have been taken by management in timely manner. Now let's start with the process of auditing information systems. When we are talking about auditing information systems, definitely the first thing is you want to define what kind of information system would you be auditing, and then you plan your audit. So for every audit, there is an aspect of planning. Then you move on to risk management. So of course, you must have had your risk management classes 2 days ago and then completed it yesterday. That whole process of risk management is involved in planning and information systems audit. So then you move on to your audit plan, perform the audit, conduct your analysis, gather your report, and then conclusion. We'll be going into some definitions now, and you can see that some keywords have been highlighted, they've been highlighted and also underlined, but we'll get into them later on as we go through our training today and then tomorrow as well. So the first thing here is just talking about what an audit is. So in the layman's term, it's just evidence gathering process. That's just what an audit is. So for instance, say K in your organization, you can decide that, I'm not so comfortable with our finances. I'm not comfortable with how the books look currently. Maybe we should get somebody who is independent of our processes, who doesn't work within our organization, to come in and audit us. So they're only coming in. So you engage with a third party, because they know nothing about what's happening. They haven't seen your books before. They're not familiar with any processes internally. You just engage them. They come into the organization. You run them through your process. Possibly you have documents, you have different things that will guide them. So you provide all of this to them, and what you're providing to them is the evidence. So they will definitely, maybe you can even line up some staff so they can interview those staff. So the process of a third party coming into your organization, that's an individual. It could be one person, it could be more, depending on how large that audit is. They will come into the organization, you provide them with different kinds of evidence, which is the audit evidence. They will go through possibly an interview with some people, or just do normal document review. That whole process is what an audit is. So if you look at those keywords, so the audit is just evidence gathering process. That's essentially what an audit is. And then the audit evidence is used to evaluate how well audit criteria are being met. Now, the audit criteria here, say for instance, an information security audit, for example. So there is a standard called ISO 27001. Wale mentioned that earlier when he was doing the introduction, where you would have the essentials classes later with me. Now, the ISO 27001 is an information security standard. ISO 27001 requires organizations to have policies, to have processes, to have procedures. All of these should be in place for a successful audit. So for instance, I can take HR audit, for example, HR policy for example. We're all familiar with HR process where you hire somebody into an organization. Now that HR policy on its own is an audit criteria. So the audit evidence that will be provided to you will now be used. So the evidence of, for example, in a leaver, somebody leaving an organization, for instance, you're asking the auditee, can you provide me with details of the last leaver, maybe, or the details of the report of leavers within the last 3 months or within the last 6 months? That's what you're asking them for. Now, the evidence they will provide to you is a record of leavers. Why are you asking for that? The HR policy states that anytime people leave the organization, that when they leave, a leaver letter will be assigned to them. And in that leaver letter, things like confidentiality responsibilities would be documented or stated in that leaver letter. Now, this is what the HR policy says. By the time you require the evidence you want is a record of leavers, and on the record of leavers in addition to that leaver letter. So that's the audit evidence. Now, the audit evidence is now used to evaluate how well that audit criteria are being met. Now, the criteria here could be many. It could be different things. I hope I'm making sense. Now, your audit as well must be objective. It must be impartial. It must be independent. And the audit process must be both systematic and documented. So you cannot just go have an audit without documenting your evidence, because that then is no longer an objective audit. Now, when they say the audit must be objective, it means you're not raising any finding, or you're not auditing based on partiality. Again, you're independent of the process, you're impartial, you're very objective, and you have evidence to prove that this audit has been conducted impartially by having that report. And that's why you must have your report. At the beginning, we looked at some of our learning objectives, and we have that part of the learning objective when you conduct an audit is to have a report, and that report will contain your audit evidence. It will contain your audit criteria as well. Now, when we talk about security audit, just the way you call it security, we're now talking about information security. So security audit is a systematic evaluation of the security of a company's information system by measuring how well it conforms to a set of established criteria. So they could have different criteria within that organization. You have policies, you have processes, you have procedures. Security audit could be maybe ISO 27001 audit. Now, the organization could have implemented a 27001 management system. By implementing that system, they want to run a security audit. Now, 27001 has a lot of controls, numbers of controls. Now, based on those controls, they can have a security audit to measure how well they conform to all of their established criteria. They can decide to have an asset management audit. They can decide to have an access control audit based on access control policy. It could be a supplier audit, third-party audit. It could be a business continuity audit. It could be HR audit, anything at all. But of course, they are all security audits. And the essence of doing those security audits is just to ensure that the information systems are being measured and aligns with a set of established criteria. So that's just basically what it is. Now we look at audit scope. Again, we're still looking at some definitions which you'll come across really. Even if you decide to apply for a compliance officer, or you apply jobs like information security officer, out of 9 out of 10, you will find yourself either managing audit or you would be an internal auditor. And I would explain that later on as we go on. So just be familiar with all of these terminologies, because you get the job, you can be thrown in the deep end, and you just find yourself that, okay, you have a third party coming in to do audit, and you're supposed to manage the audit. So that way you'll be able to understand when they say, what's the audit scope? What's your audit criteria? What's the audit evidence? You understand all of these terminologies. Now, the audit scope. The scope usually for if you are having, for example, a third-party audit, like where I come into this is I work for a certification body. So what we do is we issue certificates to organizations. and we audit their information systems, depending on the kind of audit that we are asked to do. Now, I could pick up a standard. The organization could say they want to be certified to ISO 27001. I'll go into the organization, look at all of what they've established based on the controls, and then they talk about scope. Of course, based on this definition here, the scope can either be a physical location of the audit. So for instance, if we take SmartLearning as an example, SmartLearning has an office in London. So that's the physical location of the audit. Organizational units that will be examined. So SmartLearning organizational units can be a lot. So they can have the engineering department, software developers. They can have the IT department, HR department, finance department. You know, all of these are different organizational units. SmartLearning could decide that their location, so they say we have one location in London, we have another one maybe in Africa, and we have another one in Asia. They can decide that out of these 3 locations, we only want the one in London, want to focus on the one in London for now. We want the location in London to be in scope. Out of the organizational units in London, there are 4 or 5 of them, but we only want 1 or 2 to be in scope as well. So they're not putting everything in scope. And then we look at the processes and activities as well. So so if they select HR, for example, we'll be looking at all of the processes and activities in HR. If they decide that, no, we want everything to be in scope, so we'll break down based on the organizational unit, the location, first of all, London, all the organizational units, all the processes and activities that will be included, and the time period that will be covered. This is what will form the audit scope. So most organizations will ring fence. Some other organizations will decide that, you know what, we want everything to be in scope. I have clients that they have about 20 locations. 2 weeks ago, I audited a client with 13 locations. 13 locations and over 5,810 in scope, staff in scope. And you can imagine the number of days that our audit took. So each of those locations, each of the 13 locations are physical location of the audit. And each of the locations have different organizational units that were in scope. Each of the organizational units in scope had processes and activities as well. And then the time period that will be covered for each. So some audits we had 19 days. I was working with a team. Other audits were just 1 day, depending on the risk complexity or the business complexity of that particular location. Others were just 2 days, some 3 days, depending again. So this is how you form your audit scope. I hope that makes sense as well. So again, the scope of the audit specifies the focus, extent, and boundary of a particular audit. So we're just looking at the boundary, what's in scope and what's out of scope. So sometimes they could say, okay, this is in scope. They will document the scope, and then they will also document what is out of scope so we can focus. We talked earlier on about audit criteria, and I did mention that audit criteria can include policies, can include procedures, requirements such as SOC 1 and 2. You have the ISAE 3402, you have HIPAA, Pci Dss, SOC, Sarbanes-Oxley, general GDPR, third-party contractual requirement. What I would say to you is all of these requirements have been highlighted in red. If you could make notes of them, and I'll give that to you as an assignment to go home and read up about them so you get to know more about each of these various requirements. And if you have any questions, you can ask me tomorrow. Then here we're just introducing, so these are different audit criteria, yeah? We're now introducing audit evidence. Now, I mentioned audit evidence when I was defining what an audit is earlier on. Now, audit evidence is used to determine how well audit criteria are being met Audit evidence is also used to determine how well policies are being implemented, how well procedures are being applied, and how well requirements are being followed. It's just evidence. Okay, Alfred, you are in health and social care, and I say to you, Alfred, can you show me evidence of information security training that has been rolled out to you by your organization? Because they said to me that a training has been deployed maybe 2 weeks or 2 months ago. Can you show me evidence of completion? And they've also put a time frame that everyone should have completed that within 30 days of receiving that training. And Alfred is looking through his laptop to ensure that, okay, do I have a certificate of completion? Have I completed the training? All I just want is the audit, is the evidence. Whatever evidence Alfred provides to me is the audit evidence to back that criteria of information security training. It could be maybe the IT, I'm speaking to somebody in IT, say for instance, maybe Tammy works in IT, and I'm saying to Tammy, okay, can you show me evidence that this person who left last week has been deactivated from the IT system, or maybe they have maybe it's Microsoft Azure, or maybe Active Directory, whichever system it is that they use to manage access control. And Tammy says, okay, let me check on the system. I give Tammy the details of the person that I want to see information about, evidence on, and she goes on the IT system, produces the evidence and shows it to me. So all of these different areas are just showing you how the audit evidence is being collected. Sorry about what's going on my laptop. Okay, so more on audit evidence. Audit evidence also includes records, factual statements, and other verifiable information that is related to the audit criteria being used. I cannot really overflog that. Again, we're looking at audit criteria also includes policies, procedures, requirements, just re-emphasizing that again. Audit evidence can be either qualitative or quantitative. Objective evidence is information that shows or proves that something exists or is true. So it's objective. So for instance, when it's objective evidence, I can see the evidence itself. There is no way somebody would say to me that somebody left the organization, maybe you would say Kay left the organization last week, and K was removed from the system, but then there is nothing to back it up, then that's not objective evidence. Objective evidence is the fact that you see something. So if I go into an organization, I'm speaking to any of the participants, or I'm speaking to an auditee, what I want to see is the evidence. Sometimes they can stall, sometimes they could say, oh, we don't have it to hand. Could you give us 10 minutes, or could you give us another 24 hours to get that across to you? At that point, it could be a case of, okay, they don't have it. So at that instance, I could be saying, I'm raising it as a finding. If you don't have it to hand, I'm raising it. I'll give you a few minutes. I'll give you some time to make sure that I've exhausted all of the options, but definitely I would need to see that evidence. So once I see the evidence, then it becomes an objective evidence, because if I go ahead to raise a finding that evidence is not in place, it needs to be based on an objective evidence. So it means I'm saying, this based on so and so, based on the fact that the auditee could not provide, or the information security officer or the information security manager could not provide evidence of the leaver that left the organization last week, then this has been raised as a minor non-conformity, or has been raised as a high finding, has been raised as a major non-conformity, whichever one. We'll talk about different classes of findings, but then your objective evidence always has to show or prove that something exists or is true. Then, yeah, I was just talking about findings. Now, the only time you can raise a finding is if there is no objective evidence, if the auditee are not providing you with any evidence at all. At that point, you can raise a finding. So for me, as an independent auditor, the classes of finding that I raised are classed into non-conformities. If the auditee can show me that they are meeting their audit criteria, they can provide an evidence to meet their audit criteria, and definitely they are conforming. However, on the other hand, if they do not have anything to meet the criteria, then definitely it is a non-conformity. Most organizations might not call it non-conformity. They would have their own different definitions of how they class their audit findings. Whereas for certification assessment, especially if you are assessing or auditing based on a standard. So if you pick any of the ISO 27001 standard, maybe 9001, 14001, or any of the standard at all, once they are not conforming to the audit criteria, definitely it is a non-conformity. Whereas in cases where they conform, then definitely they are meeting the requirements of the standard. It's not all the time that you raise non-conformities. So there are times where, and of course there are two types of non-conformities. There is the minor non-conformity, and there is also a major non-conformity. A major non-conformity is a total breakdown of the system. So in other words, if they do not have, say for instance, we're looking at top management involvement, and we cannot find any top management involvement at all. Even in normal projects, you always want the sponsor to be, even if they're not like 100% at all meetings, but you can always see maybe meeting minutes or attendance and status meetings or highlight meetings, you know, anyone at all, you would always find that the stakeholders are involved in the process end to end. So with the certification audit as well, it is the same. So if I go into an organization and I can tell that there is no support from top management, then that is definitely a major non-conformity, especially with the security audit like ISO 27001, where it is a requirement that top management shall be involved in the whole process of the maintenance and management of the whole system. So at that point, how am I able to know that top management are involved? Through policies, they would have to issue our policies. There will be a top management policy or a statement of intent from top management. There will be meeting minutes where they are also part of the whole process. There will be risk management. So definitely it has to be led from the top. So it's a top-down approach. There are different ways that they can demonstrate involvement. So with all of this evidence before me, I can tell that top management is involved. Whereas if they're not providing anything at all, then definitely that can be classed as a major non-conformity. And a number of minor non-conformities can constitute a major non-conformity. We'll go more into the different types of findings later on, but I just wanted to put this across to you just in case you think about it. And if you have any questions, you can ask me. You can also, so when I also do audit, apart from raising non-conformities, I also make notes of best practice or good practice, and I put that in my report as well. And there is also another class of finding called opportunities for improvement. So these are areas where there could be potential minor non-conformities, but just slight weakness. And with those, if they just need to improve that particular area. So by improving that area, instead of noting it down or just ignoring it, it's not like you're not paying attention to it, but you just want to put it in the report to show that that has actually been captured. So instead of raising it as a minor non-conformity, I would raise it as an opportunity for improvement. And I would always say to the client that this opportunity for improvement could be a potential minor non-conformity if you do nothing about them, because they're not mandated to actually address them, but it's in their best interest if they do, because when the auditor comes back again to review the management system or review the information security system, and that finding is still there, then definitely that would definitely be constituted as a minor non-conformity. Okay, so I'd also slightly talked about an audit plan. Audit plan really is just, what are you going to do? How do you intend to audit? And there is no specified way really on how you would design your audit plan, but it has specific things that need to be included in the plan. And we'll talk about that later on. It describes all the activities, and in order to achieve your audit objective, because definitely you would need to set objectives. Aside from the audit plan, there is also an audit program. I'll just explain it. So you see here is now introducing something called ISO 19011. ISO 19011 is also another ISO standard for auditing. So if you decide that, or you find yourself that you've been assigned to conduct audits or manage audits within your organization, your best bet, in order for you to get more information and be knowledgeable on how to conduct audits, your best bet is to start with ISO 19011. The current version is 2018. So ISO 19011 2018. So 19011 2018, when it talks about an audit program, expects organizations to appoint audit program managers. The truth is, all the years that I've been doing audits, I haven't come across an audit program manager. The only people that I see that manage audit program are mostly those in the risk and compliance team. So the audit program here is just looking at a period, for a specific period of time where audits will be conducted. So for instance, if it has to do with external audit, if it's a certification audit, they would need to have an audit program that would run for 3 years, because the certificate is issued for 3 years. So one of the things I'll be looking for when I'm reviewing their audit program would be a 3-year plan. So that 3-year plan would need to be broken down into the different activities that would be covered each year. So that would be them more like selecting them based on a risk-based approach. So if in an organization they feel that access control is a problem, and is a challenge, not going to say problem, it's a challenge that the organization is always encountering, that's the challenge, what they would do, or what I would be wanting to see or expecting to see, would be that access control has been specified every year. So they've selected to review access control every year on the audit program. So they would need to have that audit program for 3 years. I would review the audit program. What would they be doing in year 1? What are the controls they'll be reviewing in year 1? What are the controls they'll review in year 2? What are the controls they'll review in year 3? Now, on the flip side, you have other organizations, they don't have just one audit source in place. So they have maybe an organization that has a SOC audit. They have ISO 27001. They have Pci Dss. They also have GDPR, maybe HIPAA, maybe SOX. They have all of these different requirements. Now you can imagine how large that audit program would be, and they would need to account for each of those audits. They need to have a program. That program would also specify when each of these audits would take place. Again, I've seen different kinds of audit program. I've seen organizations where their audit program is just simple, and other organizations where their audit program is very, very complex. But again, they would need to explain the audit program to me. The audit program would also include the resources needed to plan, organize, and conduct one or more audits. So I hope again that this makes sense. So sometimes it's not like if you type on Google, say you're looking for a job and you say audit program manager, you would not find that role. This role would definitely be covered by somebody who is possibly, maybe an information security manager, or an information security officer, or a risk manager, or a compliance manager might be given that responsibility to put together an audit program for the organization. Any questions? Are you guys there? Are you following me at all?
Yeah, I'm following you.
Yep,
Okay.
we're here. We're here. We just
We are here. We are trying to listen.
soaking it in pretty much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for
We are
coming.
really on. We are really on. You are really on point. But there's something I wanted to ask. If I can go ahead.
Sorry, who's speaking, please? Because I can't
Fola Shele.
Fola Shale. Okay.
Yeah. I not on tonight. I always believe that you have to be an accountant before you can be an auditor. Yeah.
Okay.
That's my mindset, that anybody that want to audit, either you want to audit an account, until I got a lot of explanation and teaching this night to know that you don't need to be an accountant before you can be an auditor. And you don't only audit an account. There are some other things, information system can be audited and others put in place. But my question goes thus, that under the management system, is it basically on accounts of an organization, the year or the what's it called, the financial year? Is it basically on financial status? Let me put it like that. Is that management on that?
No. So that's the financial audit. So the account and all that will be managed by the finance team.
Okay.
But the finance team are also part of a management system. Yeah. So
okay.
Management, so we're talking, I was giving an example of information security management system. That's the information security. So you can hear security, like when I did introduction on what is a security audit. Yeah. Talking about information, that's the IT systems.
IT system,
now,
I understand.
IT systems. I mentioned that if you, for instance, if you want to do that kind of management audit, management systems audit, most organizations would use ISO 27001, which has 114 controls. So those 114 controls covers different aspects of the organization, from administrative controls to technical controls. Yeah.
Okay.
We have another session on 27001, so I would go into more details then, but I'm just explaining that to you. So when you talk about the account, so I personally, I have not audited any accounts before, like financial accounts. I haven't done that kind of audit because it's not my competence, is not in my remit. I just do cloud security audit. So there's also cloud security audit, which I do. There's privacy audit as well. There is quality management system audit. So there are quite a lot of audit that you can do. It doesn't necessarily have to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to be sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so now why audit? Why do people request for audit? Why audit? And you can see the first thing there is for regulatory compliance purpose, mandatory by law. So compliance, regulation, compliance would always drive audit. So you were talking about earlier on about financial audit. So for those in the financial sector, the banks, they would definitely be audited, because they are handling people's money. They have the FCA coming for them if they're not meeting requirements or managing people's money effectively. You have GDPR as well. You'll be doing your GDPR course, I think, next week. So GDPR, again, is another regulation, data protection. So regulation compliance would always drive audit. Sometimes business owners, board of directors, investors, and shareholders could decide that, you know what, we want to look into the books. We want to see how things are operating here. Let's get an independent body to come in and do an audit of our system or do an audit of the whole organization. Yeah, they will now ask an independent party to come in, and that's where you have the likes of Deloitte, PwC, KPMG, and BDO. They will come in and conduct those audits. And then again, it could be a case that, you know what? We have different controls in place, system controls, information system controls. We want to be sure if our controls are very sufficient, if they're efficient, if they're working properly, we want that reassurance Now, we don't want somebody internal to do it because, again, we are internal, so we want fresh pair of eyes. That way, they will involve a third party again to come in and do the audit again. You would have people like Deloitte, you have people like PwC, KPMG, or maybe they can now say, let's do a certification. By doing that certification, they would go for 27001, ISO 27001. And that ISO 27001, we bring in those 114 controls. And by checking through those 114 controls, they will be able to establish that they have a very good and effective system controls in place. Sometimes it could be the case that they have complex information security related problems and they want to resolve those problems. They will bring a third party to come in and have a look. So maybe it is about maybe a very legacy system that is causing a lot of issues for them. They don't know how to manage it. They can bring experts to come and just have a look, do a report and tell them what's the next thing that they need to do. Now, again, people also need to, organization, they use audit to make informed decisions. So once the audit report comes out, once they get hold of the audit report, they now begin to make informed decision. What should we do? I remember recently, I did an audit with a colleague of mine, and based on the audit, we found that the intellectual property of the organization is not being protected. Meanwhile, that is one of their objectives, to protect intellectual property. However, they've not put controls in place to protect their intellectual property, which is their source code, because it's a software development company. And we raised that as a key finding in the report. Based on the report that we shared with the stakeholders, they now began to think that what other ways, what other controls should we put in place to ensure that our intellectual property is not stolen? Because what they've done is no controls in place at all. They're not even managing the assets of all of their developers. You know, they're just trusting everybody, you know. So this is how audits can throw light or shed light on different areas. Through audit, again, you can get new ideas, better approach, you know, of doing things, especially keeping up with legislative changes. So you can get the experts to come in. They will tell you, people like Harry that will be taking you on GDPR. They'll come in. They'll look at your regulations. They'll look at different compliance. Are you meeting legislations? What are the legislations that are required? And all. Yeah, they would go through that. So based on that, again, you can know how to make your keep up with legislative changes. Then you can provide assurance to business owners, investors, stakeholders, and give them the confidence that their information security controls, be it technical or non-technical, are sufficient and effective. So these are different reasons why people audit. I remembered I had an audit, and when I was having my closing meeting, the CISO was saying to me that, what do I think about the audit? What do I think about the organization or the audit itself? And I said, oh yeah, that the team managed the audit very well. They were good and they were able to proactively provide evidence. He now goes on to say, yes, I get that, but I want more. What do you think about us? What do you think about our controls? What do you think about the team managing the controls? He just wanted that reassurance that they've put in enough security in depth. They've put in enough security controls to minimize attacks. You know, that's what he wanted to hear from me as the auditor. So just giving them that reassurance and confidence that their information security controls are not just efficient, but they are also effective. Now, audit objectives. I've mentioned audit objectives before. For every audit, you must have an objective. What is your objective? So for me, when I speak to clients, before I conduct my audit, usually I'll have an opening meeting where I'll do introduction, and then I would speak to them about the objective of the audit, run through the objective of the audit with them. So here, objective of the audit really is just you stating or just putting together your measures, making them very smart. You know, of course, every time we talk about objective, the first thing that should come to mind is setting smart objectives. So audit objectives will always form the basis of the audit. One of my audit objectives when I conduct audit is to make sure that I make positive recommendation for certification if it is a certification audit. So at the end of the audit, would I have achieved my objective? If there are major non-conformity, then that objective has not been achieved. I would not be able to make a positive recommendation. However, if they have met the requirement and there are maybe just a few minor non-conformities, again, the audit objectives have been met. I will be able to make a recommendation based on them submitting a corrective action plan, which will be reviewed. And upon acceptance of that corrective action plan, then I can go ahead and make a positive recommendation. So there are different ways you can look. You just make sure that your objective, if you're looking at your audit objective, they need to be smart. What are you intending to achieve at the end of the audit? So some of your specific goals of the audit: confidentiality, excuse me. Sorry about that. So specific goals of the audit, you have confidentiality, you have integrity, reliability, availability, and then compliance with legal and regulatory requirements. So for example, if you set a specific and measurable audit objectives, the first thing you need to establish is, establishing your audit criteria before the audit. So you have to establish what's your audit criteria. Maybe my audit criteria is my access control policy. So you have set that as your specific and measurable audit objectives. So you've established your audit criteria, and that audit criteria is your access control policy. And by looking at that access control policy, what your objective is that by the time you conduct your audit on the access control policy, at the end of the audit, you should be able to establish that all of the measures that you've put in your access control policy are being adhered to, maybe by the IT team. That's one of your objectives if you're doing an internal audit, for instance. Now, these are different types of audit sources, and we've talked about this earlier on at the beginning. So organization policies, again, falls under this particular area here, where you have your different policies, your IT security baseline requirements, blah, blah, blah. And then you have your, you have your legal and regulation, you have your GDPR, you have SOX, you have HIPAA, then you have NIST under the national standards, then international standards, standards like 27001. ISO 22301 is a business continuity standard. So for people that do not understand this one, so business continuity is ISO 22301. So these are different types of audit sources. So you can pick GDPR and decide that, so organization could say you need to conduct a compliance audit on GDPR. You just take the GDPR regulation, you look at it, and then look at the area, you produce a plan, or you can do a program, an audit program first. Look at the various requirements required that you need from GDPR, because of course it's a lot. You just look at the specific ones. You can do a program of the specific ones that are relevant at the time to the organization, put a plan together based on the requirements of GDPR. You go to maybe to the legal team and then you conduct your GDPR audit, or you could go to marketing team because they collect a lot of data. You conduct your GDPR audit. You could even go to sales. Yes, in as much as sales, they just involve with contracts, selling of things, but then they could be collecting data, so you just want to be sure that various places where data is being collected, how are they managing data? That's the important thing. So you can use GDPR. You can pick NIST as well. Please just pick all of these different keywords and read up on them. It would really, really help if you know them, because most times when you look at job specs, all of these keywords, and then they would ask if you're knowledgeable or familiar with all of these different areas, maybe in ISO, maybe it could be NIST, it could be GDPR, it could be HIPAA if it's an American company, or SOX. So just familiarize yourself with all of these different audit sources. So you can pick any one and then put your plan together. Either do a program first. If it's going to run for a couple of days, a couple of months, do a program, and then from the program, produce a plan, and then look at the audit criteria that is required for you to conduct those audits. Go there, conduct the audits, ask for the evidence. Once you get the evidence, put your report together and then share or disseminate accordingly. We're going to take a break shortly, so we can take a break and you just stretch, get a glass of water. Let's look at this slide, types of audits. So you've got the first party, second party, and third party. Now, the first party audits, they're audits that are conducted by auditors within the organization. So this is where roles like internal auditor comes in. So you have people in organizations that are internal auditors. Sometimes an information, so by the time you start applying and you get a job as an information security manager, you could be conducting a first party audit where you are only auditing internally and you're just looking at information security audit or information security system audit. Those are the kind of audits you'll be conducting. So that's first party. You are internal. You know everything about the organization. You can move from one different unit to the other and conduct those audits. In fact, you can even get a job as a risk manager, but you find yourself doing audit. So they can ask you, just be saddled with that responsibility to conduct audit. But mind you, for every audit that you conduct internally, you have to be independent of the area you're auditing. So for instance, if you are in HR, you can't audit yourself. Somebody else would need to audit you. So that's like that's the impartiality there, that's where impartiality comes to play, and you must be independent of the area you're auditing. So if it's first party internal audit, first party is all about you auditing internally. And then second party is more of supplier audits that are conducted by customers or other relevant interested parties. So for instance, a second party audit, maybe they could say, your customer could decide that before maybe you've contracted with a customer and they've decided to audit you. Why are they doing the audit? They would not come directly. They could engage with a company like PwC to audit you. They just want to be sure that you have sufficient security measures in place, or maybe you're still meeting your contractual obligation. Maybe part of the contractual obligation is that so-and-so systems or measures should be in place. So they would send a second party to come in and audit you. So those ones will come into the organization, get all of the evidence that they require, produce a report and submit that to the customer. And if you look at contracts, so sometimes when I review contracts, when I review supplier contract or customer contract, one of the things I see on the contract is right to audit. So which means that they can come in and audit you. And once you've agreed to that contract, then it means that you've agreed to the terms that they can come in and audit you at any time. Then you have third-party audit. Now, third-party audit is where people like I come into play because I am independent totally. I don't know anything going on within that organization. I come into the organization. I'm not familiar with their processes. My decisions are not biased. It is purely independent. So whatever they produce, I'm using my experience, my knowledge, and the evidence before me, and also interviews that I would have conducted, the words that they would have said to me, whatever it is, I put all of that together, I produce a report. So that's third party. So third party is always someone who is not, that is totally independent of the whole process. Then other types of audit. So you see that the other types of audit, you have the financial audit. This is where Folashe was talking about earlier, and you have those financial audits. You have operational audits, integrated audits. So third party auditors they always conduct what they call integrated audit. By integrated audit, it means an organization that has, maybe they have an information security system, maybe like 27,001. They also have business continuity, 22,301. They have Pci Dss, yeah. Maybe they also have quality, which is 9,001. Now, a third-party auditor that can go into the organization, maybe as a team, and then they would do what they call integrated audit. So that integrated audit is looking at all of these different requirements or these different sources, audit sources, and they will look at the various requirements within those different standards or different audit sources and produce a report. So they're doing an integrated audit. It's happening at the same time. It's happening maybe across some few days, or it could be one day, depending on how large the organization is. Then you've got administrative audit, you have IS audit, information security audit, you have human resource audit and forensic audit. So these are different types of audits. So you could find yourself working for one of the big four, and they can ask you to go and conduct a forensic audit or conduct a financial audit. Maybe you are in BDO or KPMG, or they can ask you to conduct information security audit. So you can just find yourself in one of these areas. So the fact that there are different types of audits, the process is always the same. It's always about what is the scope of the audit? What is the audit criteria? And what kind of evidence are you collecting? And at the end of the audit, you produce a report. I guess it's time for us to take a break. Shall we take a break now for about 5 minutes? Or shall I say, yeah, 5 minutes. Let's take a 5 minutes break. Just stretch, get a glass of water, and we'll come back in 5. Thank you. Wale, are you? I'll just pause. Tunde, Wale, are you on there? Hi, Tunde. Hi, Wale. Okay, let's take a break.
Yes, I am. Sorry. Obi, what do you need from me?
No, I was just saying that we're taking a break.
Okay. Yeah. So how long is the break for?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. So we will leave the recording on. I'll probably just pause it. But so we come back. When exactly are we coming back?
9/11.
9/11. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's fine. We'll just leave it as it is, and then when we come back, we can just carry on,
Okay.
as it is as well. All right, guys. So we'll see you guys exactly 9/11, and we will take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'll just carry on.
All right, thank you, Ori. Obi, welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, so just before the short break, I was just explaining the different types of audits. You have the first party, second party, and third party. I've explained all of those, and then the other types of audits as well. So you could be assigned to conduct any of these audits. So the same process applies. It is the same process, just apply the same. What I've been telling you, or what we've been going through, if you're asked to conduct an administrative audit, just follow the same and you get the same result, really. Elements of audit. I've talked about audit scope. We've looked at audit objectives, criteria, now the audit procedures, which is the methodology, your audit evidence, conclusions and opinions, then reporting. Remember that your conclusions and opinions will be based on objective evidence. So the fact that you do not like the face of the person you are auditing, or the fact that you do not like the way they treated you or spoke to you, you cannot base your conclusions and opinions on the all of those trivial issues. You're basing your conclusions and opinions on the audit evidence that has been provided based on objectivity. And then finally, reporting. These are elements of the audit. You define it, you get your scope, you've just followed through all of these different bullet points and then produce a report. That's what forms your audit. Now, the phase of an audit, you've got your audit subject. We'll go in through all of these, so don't really bother about much of the different keywords here. You have your audit subject. Again, we're still talking about the audit objective, the audit scope, pre-audit planning, procedures and steps for data gathering, procedures for evaluating the test or review results, procedures for communication with management, audit report preparation. We'll take each of these various aspects and talk about them. So that these are the phases of an audit, and they kind of correlate with the elements of audit. You'll see how they tie together shortly. I've talked a lot about audit evidence, and I believe that you should be able to understand and differentiate the audit evidence, audit criteria, audit scope, audit objectives by now. ISO 19011 clause 3.3 of that standard defines what your audit evidence should include. It also defines the audit criteria and also defines the audit objective, which we have looked at earlier on, but this is just emphasis on the audit evidence. And here it tells you that your audit evidence are either qualitative or quantitative. Of course, quantitative is relating it to numbers, and qualitative is just relating it to any other thing apart from numbers. Then you have the types of evidence here. You have the physical evidence. Typical example is if you go to an organization. So for instance, sometimes I do on-site visit. So I go into an organization and I begin, the moment I get to their premises, I have started my audit. I look at the premises. I'm looking at physical evidence of controls, security controls. How do they get into the office? How do they get into the building? Do they have a fob system? Is there access control, physical access control? Do they have a reception? Or if they don't have a reception, how are they managing visitors? So I'm watching. The moment I get into organization, I do that a lot because that's when the audit has started. That's the truth. Now, physical evidence as well could be where they're presenting something to you and you physically see that evidence. So that could also be physical evidence. But then the main one that I always use when I go on site for audit is physical security. Is there any element of social engineering or tailgating? There have been times where I've been to organizations and no one has challenged me and I've tailgated. Nobody challenged me. Nobody asked me if I had a pass, who I was. No one. Where in other cases, someone had challenged me and said, we don't know you. Who are you? Who are you here to see? What are you here for? And I was very pleased when they were just asking me all of those questions. They didn't even know I was there to audit them. Eventually, when I said that I was looking for so-and-so and they came out, they now realized that I was an auditor. So you can gather evidence that way. So that's another, this is one way of gathering your evidence. And then you have confirmation. Sorry, that's supposed to be confirmation. So you've spoken to maybe a senior management team. Maybe you've spoken to the CISO. So sometimes I'll speak to maybe the MD, or I could speak to a CISO. I've asked them some questions. They've confirmed some things to me. And when they've said some things to me, and when I speak with maybe one of the staff members, I'm trying to corroborate what that individual, maybe the CISO or the top management has mentioned earlier on. I want to see evidence of that. I want to confirm that. So I'm again gathering evidence that way. I'm just following the audit trail. So by following that audit trail, I'm making notes. I'm putting all of this in the note. Remember that I have to produce a report. So it will not just be in my head. I have to be taking notes as well. Then you have documentation. So documentation, of course, this could be policies, it could be procedures. So sometimes I've been at audits where they've just told me, we have all our policies on Confluence. Welcome. This is the plan you shared with us. Here are all the policies that matches the plan. Please, I'll just be here, but what you can do is just go on Confluence. We'll set you up on Confluence. Go through the document. If you have any questions, ask me. And I did that, and it was not a very good experience for me at all. And I don't think I want to do that again. But that's another way of gathering evidence, documentation. That's where the audit criteria comes in again. Is it the policy you're reviewing? Is it their processes you're reviewing? Is it procedures or standards? What are you reviewing? So documentation, you're making notes and gathering your evidence through that. Then you have analytical as well. You're just analyzing information that has been provided to you. Sometimes the way I do my analytical evidence is they say something to me. I'm not asking them a question immediately. I'm trying to analyze and internalize what I've heard before I ask them a question. So you can gather evidence that way. Then you have observation. Again, as I mentioned, once I get to a premises or to an organization site, that's their physical location, I start observing. When I'm seated, maybe in the meeting room, I'm observing. Sometimes I could decide to go and use the loo. I'm observing. What am I looking for? Are they maintaining clear desk? Do they lock and clear screen? Do they, especially if it's like a financial organization, do they leave confidential information on their desk unattended? Do they leave their screens unlocked, and for how long? Can I see emails open or anything confidential? Then definitely I'm observing all of these, I'm making notes. Then verbal, you have the verbal evidence as well, where you're having conversations. And then of course you have the technical, where it has to be, maybe this mostly will be like IT, maybe the engineering or infrastructure team, or these are all different types of, so you can have those kind of technical evidence from the technical team. So these are the different types of evidence that you can collect, and it depends. Experience would enable you to get better, because even when I started auditing, I wasn't great at auditing when I started. My confidence was very low. It was non-existent. But of course, with training, mentoring, and then continuous knowledge gathering, as I kept on auditing, I improved, and then now is just a part of me. So you can gather your evidence in any of these ways at all. Sometimes maybe the only thing you might be doing is just physical evidence. Other times it could just be observation. Some other times it would just be only technical. If you remember when we looked at, sorry, I'm just going back just to re-emphasize when we're looking at these different types of audit. So your audit evidence, the evidence that you can gather from each of these can vary. It can vary. So, but these are the different ways that you can gather your evidence. Now, how do you know that the evidence you've gathered or you've collected has substance, and they're always divided into two. Is it a sufficient evidence? And by sufficiency, you're looking at the quality and the quantity of it. And then is the evidence you've collected, is it appropriate? How relevant it is and how reliable is the evidence that you've collected? With sufficiency, we talk about quality and quantity. Of course, sufficiency sometimes is measured based on quantity of audit evidence. And the amount of audit evidence will depend on the type of audit. So with sufficient audit evidence, is the auditor's judgment really to determine what type of evidence and how much will be required. So a typical example, again, I would refer back to HR example because we can all relate to that. In an organization where they have, like the example I gave earlier, they had 13 locations, over 5,810 staff. How much evidence do you think I would collect for HR? Let me throw that to the house. What do you think would be the sufficient evidence for leavers with in 5,810 staff? Say, example, they said to me that they had in May, they had 100 leavers. How much evidence do you think I should ask for the leavers? I'll throw that to the house. Let's see.
So you can put your response in the chat box.
Yes, please.
That's okay.
Okay, 100. Okay, Alfred says 100. Please don't be shy. Engage, please. That's why we're here, to learn together. So they said to me that they had 100 leavers, and I want to look at how sufficient would it be for me if I review. So what's the quality or quantity of me looking at the 100 leavers within that organization? What do you think is reasonable for me to review or collect as evidence? Anyone? %. Okay. Any other person? Any other? Okay, 40%. Okay, thank you very much for your contributions. Okay, one more person. 100. Okay. Now, very interesting responses. Yeah. Now, so we're looking at the quality and the quantity. So sufficiency, we want to measure the quantity of the audit evidence. We also want to look at the quality of what we are collecting. Now, I'm sorry, there's a bit of noise in my background. I really apologize for this. Sorry. So they've told me they have 100 leavers in May, and I only have 3 hours to audit HR. Within that 3 hours, would I be able to cover 100? possibly the answer is no. I won't be able to go through the 100 records. So what I would do will be a sampling approach. And we'll talk about sampling later on, maybe tomorrow we'll start with sampling. I will do a sampling approach. So I would look at because the audit I did was to look at all the HR within all the 13 locations in scope, yeah? So I'll take, out of those 13 locations, the sum total of leavers was 100. So I can decide that, okay, from each of the locations, let's do 5 from each locations, or let's do 10 from each locations. That's what I would do. And within that 3 hours, I should be able to determine, in fact, by looking at already 5 records or even 10 records, I'll be able to know if the evidence that I've collected is quality or if it's quantity. If they're not really matching up, say for instance, one of location A, out of the 5 leavers that I sampled, only one has been deactivated. They removed the access, and the other 4, their access is still open. And meanwhile, their policy says that they should be deactivated within 24 hours of their last working day. And then when I reviewed the evidence, it's only one person that has been deactivated. Then of course you would know that that evidence is quality, yeah, but I've looked at, I don't know if quantity is enough, so I wouldn't really want to raise a finding on those 4 yet. I would like to look at another one again. So I can take location D and say, okay, let's look at another 5 and see if it's consistent across. I will take another 5 from location D and look at those 5. If it's consistent, if again, maybe only 2 have been deactivated and 3 are still within the system, then I'm building a case. I hope you understand what I'm saying. I can then decide, okay, let's look at location F. Let's do another 5. Then they'll bring another 5. I'll sample, and maybe at location F, it could be a case that, okay, here, again, they've managed to deactivate 4 and just 1 is just open. I'm like, okay, you know what? Based on my judgment, this is not enough. Let's go again. I can then say, let's look at one more location, maybe location E for emphasis purpose. And then I look at location E, and location E, they've not even deactivated any lever at all. And then what I'm saying to you is a practical experience that I've been through. Yeah, I've built a case. So based on this, I've gathered sufficient evidence. I've looked at the quality. I've also looked at the quantity. Again, it's based on the time frame. If I have 3 hours, in 3 hours, how much would I be able to achieve? So I would not just do, if I have 3 hours to do that audit, definitely I want to exhaust the 3 hours, make sure that I've done a thorough job. And this is where appropriateness, where the relevance and reliability now comes in. So with appropriateness, you're looking at the reliability, you're looking at the relevance of the evidence that has been provided to you. So I'm asking for levers. Sometimes I will say, okay, show me evidence of levers, show me their ticket on the system. And the next thing, they're showing me asset management. And that, oh, we've collected their assets. But my question was, have you deactivated their access from the system? Or they can tell me, oh, we rolled out antivirus, but that's not what I was asking you for. So at this point, it's not relevant to what the evidence I require. So the example that I gave you is focused on levers and when they were removed, disabled from the system. So the evidence I'm collecting has to be related and has to be relevant and reliable for me to then put my report, my result together, and then determine if it would be a non-conformity or if they're conforming to the requirement based on their audit criteria. So for every time I conduct my audit, I would first of all look at what they've stated in their policy. That's their audit criteria. What have you stated in your audit criteria? I'd look at the audit criteria first. I know what the requirement of my audit source says. Then I begin to ask them questions and match them together. So that is how you can gather your evidence. So you're looking at the sufficiency of what you've collected and also the appropriateness, the relevance, and the reliability of the evidence that you've also collected. I hope it makes sense. The appropriateness of audit evidence, so just to explain it further, again, is based on relevant and reliable. The principles, okay. Alfred, do you want to ask a question? You can unmute yourself if you can and ask a question. Can you speak? Walid, can you unmute Alfred, please, or Tunde?
Okay, I can do that.
Thank
Just
you.
bear with me.
Right, yes. I just wanted a little bit of clarity in relation to the previous slide, exactly that one. And in relation to the question you asked. So you've got 100 levers.
Yeah.
So my thought process was that you would want evidence of the 100 levers before you do the sampling. Is that how it works, or?
So they've told me that they've had 100 levers in, say, like in July. And the 100 levers, of course, they're recorded maybe on a spreadsheet or maybe on the HR system or whatever it is that they use to record that. Now, those 100 levers are scattered across their different locations.
Yeah.
Now, because of the time frame, so you need to consider the time that you're using to audit that particular process, which is the HR, the levers. Because of the time, you start off with what they call sampling.
So you don't necessarily see evidence of all the 100 levers?
No, not all the 100 levers. But if you were going to be there for maybe the whole day or maybe 5 days, definitely you can see all the 100 levers.
Okay.
Yeah, so you first work based on the time frame that you have. If you have the whole day, so I'll go back to this slide just to buttress my point. This slide. So if you were to go, you see here that it just says human resource audit.
Audits, yeah.
If you go, say you are assigned to conduct human resource audit and you to conduct that for the whole day, you have the whole day to yourself and you can do as much as you want, sample as you want, gather as is just focused on human resource audit.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes, yeah, pretty much, yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, yeah, sorry. Yes, so just to further explain this point again, now audit evidence is ordinarily more reliable, you have some bullet point here, when it is obtained from knowledgeable independent sources outside the company rather than non-independent sources. And this is where you bring in a second party or a third party. If generated internally through a system of effective controls rather than ineffective controls, like the example that I gave about how they're managing their levers process. I just wanted evidence, but I because of the time I had, I was just doing sampling of all of those controls across the different locations. Obtained directly by the auditor rather than indirectly or by inference. This is very important. As an auditor, one of the competence you need to have is to be very assertive. Sometimes clients are very smart. So when you're asking for evidence, they'll be telling you, oh, can you give me some time? And if you don't make a note of it, or if you're not assertive, you will forget. So every time they start saying, give me some time, they don't have it. The other time, sometimes they could say to you that, can you tell us what you want? And then we can go and get it for you. Once you hear that, just know that something is going on, something is amiss, because you always want the evidence to be provided to you. So it has to be obtained directly by the auditor rather than indirectly or by inference. Or sometimes I could have, I've had audits and they've said to me that the result of, so we're talking about a vulnerability remediation, a penetration test remediation, and they're saying to me it wasn't available, and I was wondering, where would it be? It is your finding. It should be on your system. It should be recorded somewhere. And they later mentioned they would send me an email with the evidence. I'm like, no, don't send me anything confidential via email. If you cannot produce it now, then I'm going to raise it as a finding, you know. So it has to be obtained directly by the auditor rather than indirectly or by inference. Now, documentary in form rather than oral, and this is where your audit criteria comes in. So every time they produce an evidence, they can say to you, just like the question that Alfred was asking, that do I have to see all of the 100 records? They've told me it's 100. I've seen that they've recorded the 100 on a spreadsheet. I've seen it, you know. So they're not just saying it by word of mouth, but there's evidence to back that up. And then it's provided by original documents rather than copies, especially for those that would find themselves doing financial audits. So these are how you can just justify your audit evidence to ensure that they are reliable. I see that Babatunde raised his hand. Wale, please, can you unmute Babatunde?
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Hi. My question is regarding the, you mentioned about the scope. So I'm just trying to, it's quite a lot to take in. So as an auditor, you do have a pre-meeting with them to say, obviously, you know, what you're there to do. Do you, whatever area of the business you're about to audit, don't you, so my question is, do you let them know what they need to produce upfront, or it's just a case of saying, right, I'm auditing, you know, their IT systems or the application, and you expect them to conform with the ISO or NIST or COBIT or whichever security framework they are implementing within the business? How do you go about that? Is it a case of you, because I'm trying to understand, because if they don't know, because you've mentioned on a few occasions now that if you ask them for evidence of a thing or if a control system or anything, and they say give us time, and it seems like they don't have time to produce anything that could be recorded against them, because but if they don't know what they are to provide ahead of time, how would you compensate for that?
Okay, thank you very much, Batunde. Yes, I know that it's a lot to take in. Sorry, that's why the session is being recorded, so you can go back and listen. I'll, of course, ask questions if you need to clarify any area. Okay, to answer your question, for every audit, a plan is shared ahead of time. So that's where the audit plan comes in. So the audit plan details the areas that will be covered. The client knows. So for instance, if the audit plan says that access control, human resources, asset management, maybe information security training, these are the areas that will be covered based on their audit criteria. So maybe the audit criteria is ISO 27001, for instance, just for example purposes. Access control in 27001 has more than 11 or 13 sub-control areas, yeah? If they see access control, they know each of those different areas in 27001 has a particular evidence that they need to provide. So me asking for evidence is not like I'm just coming from nowhere and just asking them for that. The plan has been shared. They understand that this is what the auditor will be requiring, and they prepare for that. Does that help? Does that help, Babatunde? You can type, yeah, okay. Yes, okay, great. All right, so that's fine. Yeah. Okay, so again, we're back to ISO 19011. It says that audit evidence must be verifiable. So every time they provide evidence to you, it must be verifiable. Based on 19011, you gather your evidence. You're obtaining your evidence through information that they're providing to you. The information you're collecting must be obtained impartially. Remember, you're not being biased. You must be impartial. And then you now review that information against the audit criteria. And that's the example. The example I gave earlier about the HR, the organization where I've requested for to see records of leavers. Their audit criteria says that their policy says that every time somebody leaves the organization, they would disable access to systems within 24 hours. And that's on their last working day. They would disable on the last working day. So now they've given me evidence to support that. I've obtained it impartially. I'm now reviewing what they've supplied to me against their audit criteria. Are they meeting criteria? And like I said, based on the different locations that I sampled, at the end of the day, they were not meeting their audit criteria because a number of those accounts were still not disabled. They were still enabled on the system. And thereafter, findings were raised against that. So your audit evidence must always be verifiable. It must not be word of mouth. You have to see the audit evidence, because remember that the report will not only be read or consumed by internal stakeholders. Sometimes customers can ask, or third party can ask for those reports. The reason they are asking for those reports, the organization, they're using that to meet contractual obligations. So it could be that the clients have said to them, or their customers have said to them, that in order for us to engage with you, you must go through audit. So they will get people like us to come in, do this independent audit, to produce a report. It will be consumed internally, but they would also disseminate to their customers and to their clients as well. So everything you put in your audit report, so you don't get into trouble, has to be based on fact. It has to be based on truth. You need to put in everything that you evidence. You need to put the details of the evidence. Of course, if it has to do with individuals, personal details, you can only take initials because you don't want to put people's details out there, So you can do initials and just put different things, and they can put that in a report. And of course, you have to ensure that your evidence is verifiable. Yeah, so we talked about, I mentioned audit plan earlier on. So the audit plan is what will enable the auditees, enable the client to know the areas that would be covered during the audit, where they can begin to prepare and produce their evidence so that they can to pass their audit. Now, these are the various elements in your audit plan. It has to include the objective. What do you intend to achieve? What is the criteria? Would it be based on their policy? Would it be based on their procedures? Would it be based on maybe one of the frameworks or audit sources, say like a NIST, say like GDPR, 27001, SOC 1, SOC 2? What is the criteria? And then the scope, which location, which organizational unit, what activities, what business processes are in scope? Then who are the auditees and their representative, the date and locations, the schedule and duration of expected activities. And this is what I was saying earlier on. I had only 3 hours to review HR as a whole. And one of the main things I wanted to do during the HR was to review leavers. I had 3 hours to do that. Some other times, the different areas, it could be 1 hour, it could be 45 minutes, it could be 30 minutes, depending on how complex the area is. So duration of expected activities. Other times, once you start auditing and you find out that that area is so complex, for instance, I could be auditing, I've not been to the organization before. I would always say to them, although I've allotted time for this particular activity, because I haven't been here before, I would need to get a good understanding of how that process works. So if I'm not keeping up with time or meeting time, I would like to request for maybe further 15 minutes or further 30 minutes. So I would get all of the information I need for this particular area, especially if that area is a complex area and is really, really, really important to the organization. So you need to bear that in mind. The fact that you've assigned 1 hour and you're running out of time, do not panic. You can always explain to the client that because of how complex that particular area is, hence the need for you to increase the time in that area and to make sure that you've covered all of the relevant aspects. Then your audit plan should also include roles and responsibilities of audit team members and their guide. So some audits have been in audits where we're more than 3 because the organization is large. In fact, I've been in audits where we're about 11 team members because the organization is just so large. And when they talk about roles and responsibilities, audit team and their guide, so you have this guide here is people like you on the other end, the information security manager. If I go into an organization, I can't just be walking around on my own, I need a guide. If I need to go and speak to people in IT, I don't know where IT is. I don't work in that organization. I need a guide. So this is where the risk manager or the internal auditor or the information security officer or information security manager would serve as a guide. And then you have logistics and communication. What's the language of the audit? Would there need to be any interpreter? How long would it take to travel? And sometimes I would also ask for driving. So if I'm going to drive to site, I would ask if there is parking on site or if there is a better place that they can recommend for me to park. So all of these need to be put in the plan as well. And then of course, allocation of appropriate resource to critical area of the audit. So if they have a critical area of the audit, who are they assigning to that particular area so that they can make that person available? So it's not on the day of the audit, they would come up and say, oh, the individual is not available, and meanwhile there's no other person to cover up for him. Of course, that becomes a single point of failure, and that way they've picked the finding on that already. So with the plan, you need to send it ahead of time. I sometimes like to send my clients' plan like 1 month before, ahead of the audit, so that they are aware that these are the areas that will be conducted. They have 1 month to prepare. Some other times, if I've visited the client before, they have the plan 1 year ahead. So the plan is always in their report, their audit report, the plan for the next audit. So there's really no excuse why they shouldn't have prepared for the audit in 1 year. So the essence of me sending it again, maybe 1 month prior to the audit, is just a reminder, but they've had that plan 1 year before the audit. So they've had enough time to prepare, pull evidence together, and make the audit just run smooth. But in cases where they haven't prepared for the audit, they probably are very engaged and busy with, with your usual BAU, then definitely the audit would not go the way they expect it to go. But all of these, everything here on the audit plan is contained in the ISO 19011, and you can see the clause number there. So I'm just going to run. I don't know if people have questions. If you have questions, so I can take some questions now. Wale, I'm hoping that we aim to finish at 10 o'clock. Please.
Absolutely. Yes. So, guys, if you have questions, there are no stupid questions, to be honest. In fact, your question can trigger more questions from other people. So I would encourage you, if you have, just raise your hand. I would unmute you, and you can fire your questions. Obi would be more than happy to help, and I would be here as well to support if need. I think Alfred has got one. Okay, let me unmute Alfred. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi. Yes. So I'm just pretty much reflecting on the start of the session, and I'm just thinking that everything we're doing or is supposed to be done or implemented is based on the ISO standards. Is that correct?
Sorry, say that again.
Everything you're doing or everything we would have to be doing in the future is based on the ISO standards.
No, that's not correct. It's based on the audit criteria, really. So it can be anything. It doesn't have to be the ISO standard. It depends on the organization.
Mm-hmm.
So if the organization has SOC in place, then definitely it has to be based on the SOC requirement. If they have Pci Dss, it has to be based on Pci Dss. If it's GDPR, it has to be based on GDPR. You know, the reason why I've been talking about the ISO, because it's the most common one out there in the industry. So when you start looking, I would advise that after the training tonight, just go online and search for jobs. Just search information security officer or manager, and you would see ISO coming up. And again, most of the things that we've talked about, you see them as part of the requirements as well, or good to have, essential to have. Yeah. So it's not just based on the ISO. Yeah, it's different sources. Really.
Sources. Okay. Okay. And I suppose that the organization you may work for would determine what standards they're using, isn't it?
Yes, they will determine. So some organizations don't have ISO at all. Most of the ones that are, some of them would have SOC. So I have clients that have ISO, they have SOC, they have PCI, they have SOCs, they have GDPR, they have all sorts. Yeah. So whilst others will not even have ISO, they have other different audit sources,
standards,
frameworks in place, or standards. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could also just quickly chip in. Good question, Alfred. And I would encourage everyone to ask questions. In fact, this is the good time to ask questions because we only just got 8 minutes, to round up this section. So Obi has explained it. There are different audit criteria, and those audit criteria, could be it could be anything. Tunde, I got your message. Thank you. Those audit criteria, it could be anything from ISO 27001, and I think Obi clearly explained it. ISO 27001 being a de facto standard, de facto in the sense that something that everybody, and when I say everybody, I'm referring to all the industries in this world. So different industry verticals. So if you go to transportation, if you go to oil and gas, if you go to consumer product, retail services, if you go to technology, just pure technology, maybe telecommunication, you work, with artificial intelligence, and you just name it. Think about all of these different industrial verticals. So these industries, it's like everybody has come together. When I say everybody, and I'm talking about those industries, and they have come together to accept ISO as a type of best practice, a de facto standard. All right. So if you go across all of them, you would always find that ISO is used everywhere. All right. It's something that everybody has come to accept that this is a best practice. It's the baseline for every other thing that we want to do. And that's why ISO is very popular. And that's why for you to be successful, no, I take the word back, for you to quickly get into this industry of cybersecurity, information security, then you have to learn ISO. All right. So that's why we are deliberate in training you, ensuring that you learn, the core principles of ISO. Like I said, it is the basis, is the foundation. Every other thing is layered on ISO. For example, Ariboja is going to be teaching you GDPR. All right. But in the industry, for you to be able to implement GDPR, if you already have ISO 27001, it's a lot easier for you because GDPR is a type of regulation. Earlier on, Obi also talks about Pci Dss. All right. If you have ever worked with retail organization like likes of Tesco, Sainsbury's, or you work with e-commerce organization like Amazon. All right, where they process credit card and debit card details. All right, the regulation, which is Pci Dss or interchangeably standard, mandates those in the retail sector, all right, to comply to Pci Dss. But if they're already ISO 27001 certified as a company, or if they're already practicing the principles of ISO 27001, which again, could be a good baseline, then it's a lot easier for them, to be able to comply to PCI DSS. So you can see that ISO 27001 is a de facto standard. It's everything. It's something that every organization, wants to have. All right, whether they have it, by getting compliant or certifying to that standard, or they're just following the principles. All right. So that's why we thought that it's good for you to know that first, before you start to learn any other thing. Okay. So, and I think Obi has already explained that the reason why we keep hammering or referring to ISO 27001 is because you would come across it everywhere you go. And also on the back of this training as well, Obi is going to come back after tomorrow to train you guys on ISO 27001 Essential. As a matter of fact, today she is just scratching the surface. All right, but in subsequent training, then she will now go into in-depth of what ISO 27001 is, calling out all of the annexes and also the clauses in ISO 27001. I hope that, help you further, Alfred. All right, okay. If you have any questions, I don't know, please, this is a good time to, there are no stupid, questions, please. It's a very good time for somebody, for you to ask questions, and maybe it would help other people as well. Anybody? Okay, maybe Obi, you want to use the few more minutes that you've got. Maybe just touch on one or two things, then we'll close for tonight.
Okay. I'll just introduce this and we can pick up from here tomorrow. Yeah. So
what time is tomorrow? Just out of interest.
12 o'clock.
12 o'clock. All right, 12 noon. I'm sure everybody's aware.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go on then.
Yeah. So we've just talked about the content of the audit plan and the process involved from initiation, planning, execution, and evaluation. So you'd see that under initiation, you need to plan, you define your audit objective. These are things that you're probably familiar with now because we've kind of overflogged all of these various areas. You define your audit objectives, you validate the scope, you define the criteria, you agree time scale and deliverables, then you form your audit team. And then when you move on to the planning phase where you're preparing, you have to contact the key stakeholders. I think it was Alfred that asked that, how would they know what should be in place, the kind of evidence that they should prepare for. This is where you have that conversation with them, not that you're preempting or telling them what to do, but you're just having that conversation because you want to have a smooth audit and you want everything to be available. You contact the key stakeholders. So you can contact them either via email or you can call them over the phone. So sometimes I do call over the phone and then I follow up with email. You prepare the audit plan, you do your pre-audit meeting, you create your audit test plan, then you do a site visit. Currently, I'm more like hybrid, which means that sometimes I could go on site and other times I'll conduct the audit remotely. And for execution, where you now begin the actual performance of the audit, you start your audit, you begin to collect the evidence, you analyze your evidence, you discuss your findings. Definitely for every time you raise a finding, you need to let them know. So I say to them when I'm having the pre-audit meeting, in order to avoid any surprises, I would communicate the findings to you so there are no surprises when we have the closing meeting. So if I'm reviewing a particular area and I come across a finding, I would definitely communicate that to the auditee so they're aware of it. And if I'm there for more than one day and they have anything else to support that finding, they can bring that and then we can close the finding on site if I'm satisfied with what they're providing, the evidence that they've provided. We discuss the findings, I create the audit report. And then in terms of evaluation, we do the closing, we agree corrective action. I would explain what that means. We perform actions, we verify implementation, we close the action, and then we close the audit. And this is just a process from end to end about audit. And we'll go into details and tackle each of these areas when we come back tomorrow.
All right, thank you, Obi. I just have, two questions. I always have questions anyway about auditing. Obi, in your, because you're an auditor and you've audited a lot of organizations, different, sectors, I believe. What would you say is the benefit of pre-audit meeting? From experience, what would you say is the benefit to yourself and also to the client?
The pre-audit meeting, it sets the tone for the day, because that's where you would understand more about the organization. So I, for one, before I go into any organization, I would have read up about them. Definitely, they have a website. I'll read up on them. I'd look at any news. And this is what we'll be discussing when we have the pre-audit meeting. So that pre-audit meeting is always a very good approach, where it's a good time. Of course, you're introducing yourself, you're talking about, so I could even, break the ice by saying, oh, although I've gone on your website, I've read about what you do. I like this particular thing about your organization or your processes. Boy, it's always good when you hear firsthand from those behind the scene. What do you say to that? Can you tell me more? So that pre-audit meeting sets the tone for the audit. That way you're even there analyzing you, you're also trying to know, okay, do I think the audit will go smooth? And that way you can also know how you can manage your auditees, look at their personalities. So you're in all of these during the pre-audit meeting. During pre-audit meeting, sometimes I would know if the audit will be difficult or not, just based on body language and personality. Yeah, so pre-audit meeting is very, very important, and it's essential. You must always have a pre-audit meeting before you get into the meat of the audit.
Sure. The other question I have is around, discussing findings. All right. So is it mandatory? Because I remember, earlier on you had said that, in the course of your pre-audit meeting, you set the tone, so you set the tone of the audit and the expectations as well. So is it mandatory that you discuss, the findings, so I can imagine that if you're going to audit a client, for 5 days, and you're going to discuss the findings with them after each, after the close of the audit for each of the day. So is it mandatory that you do that? Or, would you not rather just leave it till, the end of the 5th day before you discuss the findings with them?
The essence of the best approach would be to always discuss the finding at the end of the day, or the moment. So at the end of the particular area or session. Is always good to discuss the finding. The essence of doing that is, if they can go back, think about it, especially if I'm going to be there based on the question for 5 days, they can think about it. The next day, we can do follow-up. I can have some more audit trail. They'll probably have thought about the finding, and maybe they have something to produce to support that finding. So looking at it, I'll review it. And based on my judgment, I would say, okay, no, I'm going to leave it open as a finding, or I can close it. So that's where they have that leeway, really, to see if they can produce anything at all. So the essence of really discussing the findings keeps them on their toes. And there are no surprises at the closing meeting. They already know. At the end of the day, they always have a debrief as a team. So they'll talk about it, and they probably inform the stakeholders as well, so they're aware, because at the closing meeting, all of them want to be there. And during the closing meeting, although I've been talking about the findings every day, at the closing meeting, I'll just do a summary of all of the findings.
Sure. On my other question about the findings, have you been in a situation where the auditee challenged your finding? So a situation where you said, all right, this is my finding because, you could not provide an evidence, for this blah, 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 blah. And when they've come back and said, no, that's not correct. Have you been in a situation like that? And if yes, what did you do?
Several times. I've been in situations, yes, where I've been challenged that it's not appropriate. And this is where again, you're basing everything on objectivity. Remember, I talked about that earlier. Your finding has to be based on objective evidence. You're looking at the criteria, and you're also looking at whatever framework or standard or audit source that you are assessing against. So that's what you're basing your finding on. I remember that I mentioned that you cannot raise finding just for the fact that you do not like the organization or you do not like the auditee. You have to base it on the audit criteria. So instances where I've raised findings and I've been challenged, I leave it on my report. And what they now do, my company has an appeal process. So I've had clients actually gone through the appeal process to say that they do not agree with the finding, and then they've now assigned an independent auditor to review that finding. So that's because there's no way I would close the finding because the client has said, they said to me that, oh no, we don't agree with that, we have enough evidence in place, whereas they don't have enough evidence in place, because I know what I'm saying. I know that I'm not just raising the finding based on partiality, is I obtained impartial evidence. So where he's been challenged in that way, I always refer back to them, raise an appeal, go through the appeal process, and then I'm out of the picture.
Fantastic.
So that's the way I've handled it, really.
All right. Okay, one more question before I let you go. Oh, sorry.
That's fine.
So under the initiation, there we have the define audit objective, validate the audit scope, then you define audit criteria. And earlier on, I think Alfred asked a question about audit criteria, which I believe you provide the perfect answer for that. But I came later to just expatiate a little bit on it. You're an auditor and you know the concept of integrated audit, where you have more than one audit criteria at a particular instant, maybe for that customer. So maybe a situation where you wanted to audit them on ISO 27001, then on the other hand, you also want to audit them maybe on ISO 27017, let's say the same family of ISO, all right? So if you've been in that kind of situation where you're doing an integrated audit, where you're considering more than one criteria per time, how difficult is this? How did you go about it?
That one, the approach first is the way that ISO has structured their standards. They've done what they call high-level structure, which means that across the ISO standards, they follow the same clause numbering or clause approach structure. So from clauses 1 to 10, they kind of capture the same thing. So my approach first, because of course, for you to do a cloud security audit at 27017, you need to have 27001. So you must first have implemented 27001 to go to then implement 27017. So my approach always will be to first review the similar clauses and then move on to the differences, the different variations. Is a very difficult one, but the example that you've picked is very simple, because without them having 27001, there's no way that the cloud security would work. So they need to have established controls, security controls, and then build on the security, just like what you were saying earlier on, build on the security controls and then have those cloud securities in place.
Fantastic.
So, easy one. Yeah.
Fantastic. Just one more question, and that's it for tonight. We looked at this audit, plan details, and we can see, 4 different areas there. You initiate, you plan, you execute, you evaluate. All right. Obi, from your experience, as an auditor, how important is planning? In carrying out an audit. And I say when planning, I'm not talking about, having like nice paper plan. I'm talking about planning from an individual viewpoint. All right. You yourself, how important is that? So you have to show up at client's place. You have to document your findings. You have to be observant. Is that correct? So how, and I think about all of those things, it looks more like an inherent skills that someone have to have. So what are those things that would make auditing easy? Inherent skills that you have to have that will make auditing easy for you. Maybe one or two, just so inherent or soft skills that someone have to have, to make it easy. What are they? Yeah.
The question you asked just brings me back to when I was interviewing for this role, and the telephone interview, they asked me if I had any questions. And one of the questions I asked the interviewer was, what advice would you give me if I get this job? That's what I asked him. He was thrown aback and was like, fantastic question. The first thing I will tell you is to have good organizational skills.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. Do you know how to organize? Are you good in organizing, planning, different things, just generally, even with your own life before you then take it to work? That's what he said to me. And that never left me. So in order for you to have a great audit and to manage this whole thing about audit, you, first of all, as an individual, one of the skills you should have is a good organizational skill. And then, of course, you add time management to that, because you would meet different types of clients. There are some that they keep to time. They're like timekeepers. You don't want to keep going on and on and on and on, and they're just marking time. Because of course they're there, they know that they need to do the audit because it's either for one contract or the other, or others is just to tick as a tick box exercise. They have other things to do. So time management, organizational skills is very important. And of course, you need to carry your clients along. That's where that key contact key stakeholders comes into play. And then you have, of course, the time scale and deliverables. You have to agree to those time scale and deliverables. Even when you have those pre-audit meetings, again, you need to emphasize and talk about the time. Are you okay with the plan? Is there anything we can move around? Do you think there are areas where we can add additional time? And this is where I can always say, okay, I've looked at risk management. I see that we've only allocated 30 minutes, and I don't think I can do it in 30 minutes. Can I make it 1 hour? And I can move things around. So planning is really, really important.
All right. Okay.
Skills, time management would help you to manage your audit plan. I hope that has helped.
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Obi. And thank you all for joining tonight's section. We return tomorrow at 12 noon, I believe. So if you require further information, please by all means reach out to myself or Tunde Shogalu on the Telegram group. Obi, fantastic. Thank you so much. That was so insightful. I believe all of our students today, including myself, have learned something new, as we look forward to another wonderful section tomorrow. For every other person joining us from other channel other than Zoom, thank you for your time today. I hope that you have learned something new and you have gained new skills. We'll see you tomorrow by God's grace. And have a good night rest, everyone. Thank you and bye for now.
Thank you.